Funny enough, I actually approached David to do a podcast with me, but he kindly rejected it and asked that I do one with him.
I went to school in Dubai.
The family background bit was extremely hard, and I was kind of put in a disadvantaged kind of position where I kind of was in and out of school. It was extremely traumatizing and very disruptive. I was about 8 years old when that happened. The first time I shared it was with my church group, and I think everyone was just amazed. They were like, wait, what? You seem so normal now, how has this happened? My dad left me kind of this slip. It was in one of our bags of the Lord's Prayer, and that was something that I prayed, and in general I just prayed. I was like, God, if you're real, please. That's how I was featured in this Vogue. It was the London's 10 best street style outfits of that season.
New York Times as well.
Yeah, I've seen it all. So just try and find brands that align with your your aesthetic, I would say. Yeah, we call every day.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffee's on Me, David Quan, where I strive to give guests legacy-worthy interviews that listeners can enjoy while cooking, commuting, relaxing, or walking their pets. I'm loving Easter holidays, having just returned from a soul-enriching tour around the Peak District, sharing the joys of music with primary school children and supporting the Cambridge varsity rugby team in London. It's also been nice having the space to work on my dissertations, but for now, I'm grateful to meet and record this episode with my guest at Queen's College, University of Cambridge. We are approaching 10,000 podcast downloads, and if you have been enjoying the discussions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, thank you, and please do consider leaving a review and nominating a guest by contacting me via my Linktree, David Quan. For those new to the podcast, welcome, and thank you in advance for your engagement. Please know that I don't take your time and feedback for granted, because when I started this podcast at a low point of my time in Cambridge, I was mostly nervous about humiliating myself. But I went ahead with this passion project based on 3 ideals that still make up the content description for every single episode. First, a purpose of giving. Second, learning from others. And third, sharing of stories. I will be the first to admit my many, many inadequacies, and I'll certainly listen back to laugh at how naive I am. But I genuinely maintain the deep conviction that this passion project, if wholly true to those founding motivations about giving, learning, and sharing, is a worthwhile pursuit. Seeing this podcast on people's Spotify Wraps or receiving positive messages about the guests always gives me great fulfillment. I cannot thank all the guests enough for their courage and insights. With great pleasure, I introduce my guest, Melissa Dewar. Melissa is currently a final year Master of Architecture student at the University of Cambridge studying part-time. Her academic studies are related to the field of technology and finance in relation to our built environment. Her thesis examines the architecture of financial institutions in the phase of digitalisation. While studying, she also has 3+ years of work experience as an architectural designer in London. Outside of her studies and work, she was involved with the Cambridge TEDx Society and CURIS, which is the Real Estate Investment Society. She has also worked on a number of startup projects and businesses, one of which includes Majestical, an online platform and print magazine dedicated to empowering your modern individual through sharing the stories of inspiring individuals, entrepreneurs, and creators. Melissa herself was featured in Vogue, Elle, and New York Times. In 2022, she competed and led a team in the Heinz HRNES Student Real Estate Competition, where her team explored the urban significance of the Centre Pompidou. Hope I pronounced that right. In 2021, she was selected as one of 20 women to compete in the finals of Miss Universe GB, where she used her voice to raise awareness for parent-child abduction. Melissa, what a bio. Welcome to my podcast, Coffee's on Me, David Quan.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely lovely to meet on a beautiful day. How did we meet?
We met on LinkedIn, actually, where, funny enough, I actually approached David to do a podcast with me, but he kindly rejected it and asked that I do one with him. So we completely flipped the coin on its head, which is totally fine, because I don't mind being interviewed. But I originally wanted to interview David, so maybe let's see how this podcast goes.
Let's hope you don't flip it around during this recording.
But I filled in your form, and then here we are in Cambridge. So
that's great. Well, I guess that's one. I'm excited to get to know you more obviously very impressed by all your achievements in the diverse range of experiences that you've had. But that's one point of similarity, is that we both are quite passionate about asking other people questions.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think you get to learn so much, which I'm sure you found yourself as well.
Well, congratulations actually for just finishing your master's dissertation.
Thank you. I made it to the end, just about.
You must be feeling quite relieved at this point.
Yeah, it's a really odd feeling. I'm like, I don't know what to do with all my spare time now.
I was really touched by your post about the resilience that you've had. So you've obviously about to get this master's degree from Cambridge, but you almost were going to come here for undergrad. You were pulled and missed out by 1 or 2 slots, and it was awfully close.
Yeah, I had a bit of so my Cambridge journey, really, I knew since I was like a young child that I really wanted to go there, and I kind of had a very like high achieving academic background, and had it kind of almost like the expectation was drilled into me that I would be going there, especially for my undergraduate, and my school at the time was kind of grooming kids, if you like, to be sorry, maybe that's not the right word, but like grooming children to enter Oxbridge, and I had my heart set on doing architecture at the time, and I'd applied. I actually applied to King's College, which was extremely oversubscribed for architecture, so I think they pulled like most people out into other colleges. And I remember getting kind of that letter through, being like, oh, like, you haven't made it to King's, but we think you're still a worthwhile candidate. And they were going to try see if they had another place in another college, and then unfortunately that fell through. But yeah, it was extremely disappointing. And I remember like the sense of kind of being like, oh my God, like, is this an academic thing? Is this that I haven't performed well enough? But I think looking back now, it was just that I wasn't ready for that. And I'm actually really glad everything kind of turned out the way it did. I ended up going to Bath for my undergrad. I let go of the dream a little bit, and then I remember kind of looking at master's courses, be like, why don't I try again? And it was a bit scary because I was like, well, what happens if the same applies again? But actually, luckily enough, the course I was applying to this time, the master's course, it didn't have a specific college you apply to. They just select college for you. So maybe that was why I managed to get in the second time. But yeah, so here I am, and it's been honestly a crazy 3 years of my life. So yeah.
It was wonderful. I think showing that kind of resilience is always very admirable, and it reminds me as the first lesson you put down for the 10 things that you've learned in 2022. You wrote to fully trust God in all his plans. His plans for my life far exceeds mine, and but it seems like that at that point, even though you had that deep faith and that you've been praying, and you still obviously felt that emotional disappointment. So
absolutely.
That moment when you heard that your dreams of actually studying undergrad at Cambridge just wasn't coming to fruition, do you remember where you were and just...
I remember being with my dad at the time, and I remember just crying with him and being like, oh, because I think I took him on this journey with me as well, so I think he was just as disappointed as I was. But he always said to me, and actually, funny enough, some of the first few words they said to me was, you can always apply for your master's, which is really funny. But he always still believed in me, and he really encouraged me to kind of look forward and view it as he very much advocated for using pain for like good things, and using that to drive you in whatever you do in your future.
It's cool that he quoted you Vince Lombardi. I actually received a Vince Lombardi book back in when I was 16 from a basketball coach.
Oh, wow.
And I just thought he was really inspirational with the way he talks about like quitters and winners and how you got to persevere and continue. I was really actually interested by kind of your LinkedIn bio at the very start. It's always interesting to see what people consider most important to the way they act or present as a professional image. But you wrote, as Aristotle once said, that excellence is a habit, not an act, and we are what we repeatedly do. These are the principles that we live by. Do you want to elaborate on your habits and just what you repeatedly do them?
I really in general, I really love the teachings of Aristotle. I think that quote in particular, sums up a lot of, in a very concise way, some of are like self-development theories in life in general. Aristotle does it in a way that's very academic and very concise and to the point, which I really love. And I think in terms of I think in general the habits and the way that we live our life, whether that's how we give to our community, what we do for other people, how kind of self-aware we are, I think helps us develop and helps us, I think, grow into better people, and in turn, I think, are able to be more successful in our endeavors. And yeah, the reason why I kind of put that quote there was, I think in interviews, I have been asked this actually in a few job interviews. I want to be portrayed as someone who does strive for excellence and who does do the steps needed to, whether that's in a job or whatever that is, to get there. Yeah.
I'd like to understand a bit more about specifically what you do, but before then I think it might be helpful to just understand a bit about your journey up to this point and just contextualize these kind of habits and best practices that you evoke. But you mentioned earlier that you'd always kind of wanted Cambridge from a young age. How young, and do you want to paint a picture of your maybe childhood or academic journey, whatever you're comfortable with?
So I had quite an interesting background. I grew up, was born in London, but I grew up in the Middle East. Wow. So in Dubai, my father set up his business out there. We kind of moved out there when I was 4. I don't remember that much at that point, but I do remember it was a desert. So my memory is a bit kind of loose from that point. And then, spent several years there. I went to school in Dubai. Growing up, I would say I didn't have the best family background. My parents divorced when I was about kind of 10 or like 9-10 years old, and I came back to the UK then to kind of complete my studies and my the rest of my kind of career journey, and during that time as well, in the transition from kind of the Middle East to the UK. I also spent some time in Turkey as well. But yeah, the kind of the family background bit was extremely hard, and I was kind of put in a disadvantaged kind of position where I kind of was in and out of schools, changing schools. I actually didn't have the best academic background until I came back to the UK. Once my parents divorced, I came here with my dad, and he really put me into kind of the best schools. I remember doing my I think it was 11 plus exams, or I don't know what the exams are when you just apply to prep school. And I remember getting 20% in my maths exam and being like, oh my God, this is so bad. And at that point, my dad was like, okay, we're going to get you a tutor. We're going to really invest in you. And in general, he was someone who really invested in my career and my studies, and that really helped me get back on track. The kind of the tutoring, the effort that I had to put in, and kind of going from 20%, I then got to my A levels and got 100% in maths. So it kind of shows that and it was, as you mentioned at the beginning, it was that perseverance that really turned me, and it was really kind of, and I think that stemmed from the childhood of having those things taken away from me, because often when you have those things taken away from you, you kind of want to really strive to get them and get them in abundance. So that's incredible.
So at age 4, when your dad moved to Dubai to set up his business, is that right?
Okay. He had a financial services company.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he was working in London.
Yeah.
And then thought it's best to expand the business there.
Yeah.
And the whole family just went
out there, yeah.
It's a bold move.
Yeah, it is a bold move, but I think financially, I think it was the right thing to do, and the tax benefits as well, I think, were very beneficial. So yeah, it was very bold, and I think it was a great experience. I definitely don't, I don't think he regrets it or we regret it. Yeah. I
don't know much about Dubai, to be honest, but I often go past there for transit because I'm coming from Australia, so Dubai. So I can maybe only talk extensively about the airport. But
tell me, it's probably completely changed since I've been there, to be honest with you.
But why don't you paint what a kind of child, or what do you remember from your time in Dubai, and just, I guess, you may have felt like you were a foreigner?
Yeah, well, there definitely was. Well, at the time when we arrived, like I mentioned, there wasn't really much development. It was at the crux of kind of its development boom. And I remember we had a flat there, and it was very kind of meager beginnings, if you like, because my dad was kind of trying to find clients and trying to really grow his business, and it really kind of took off, I think, when I was probably around like 7 years old, and like everything started developing. We really kind of got to new people and friends. I think make a community people. I would say the expat community out there was great. It really was a really great community. Everyone kind of knew everyone, but I think as it did develop, I think it did become very superficial, in that it was extremely materialistic, which I think is something that hasn't changed right now. It's probably become more materialistic, to be honest with you, with the kind of construction stuff they're building now. But it was very much became very much a money-dominated society, from what I remembered,
I don't know if you ever want to have kids, but would you want your kids to experience a bit of time in Dubai, for example? Like, what do you remember
Absolutely
fondly?
not. Absolutely not, in that it got very complicated when my parents got divorced because of the law and the kind of the rights you can have out there.
So even though they're British citizens, they're bound by those laws for their marriage.
So my mum is Turkish, so I think she did have a British citizenship though, but I think their laws, the divorce procedure was very much skewed towards their laws.
Oh, okay.
What kind of system it was done on, I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, it became extremely messy.
And that obviously has,
Yeah.
So coming back to the UK then, 20% in that math test, and then you got your... I guess...
Don't worry, I never did that ever again.
I guess, like, at that age, I mean, I've also got some terrible results. Like, I remember in Australia, there's something called a NAP plan, like National Assessment Plan for Literacy and Numeracy. Yeah. Basically, it's a standardized test where you do in year 3, year 5, year 7, year 9.
Yeah.
I'm quite sure for year 3 and year 5, I was like below national average, and
Yeah.
but like I never really like felt that stress at that age. It was just like, oh, you need to work harder. What were you feeling at the time in terms of like what kind of you wanted to achieve in your teenage years, at least? You know, what kind of girl were you? Were you sporty, artistic? I'm sure artistic, but...
Yeah, I think I was definitely very artistic, I think, and that...
who needs math?
Yeah. No, I think initially kind of definitely was quite artistic. I actually really hated sports, which is really funny because I'm the completely opposite now. But I was not very sporty, but very artistic, and that was very involved in kind of my art classes, and I had a great relationship with my art teacher at the time. But obviously going on, as I really worked on my more academic skills, those actually became stronger than my artistic skills. And actually I ended up enjoying them more. So it was kind of quite funny how and that was kind of more when I was doing my A-levels and towards the end of my GCSEs.
So you were taking these art classes, were they by your choice, or did Dad just think that's good for you?
No, I just took them by my own choice. Wow. Yeah.
At the school?
Yeah, at the school. Yeah.
They offered it?
Yeah, they offered fine art to everyone.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did that involve?
Just
or
a lot
weekly
of
meetups? And...
Yeah, it was just weekly or twice a week sometimes. And yeah, we would do kind of still life. Learned to paint with oils. Yeah, it was really great.
What did you like about it?
I think it was very relaxing. I think whenever, in general, I find this is something that kind of drew me to architecture as well, was that the moment you kind of put pen to paper, it's just, you're in your own bubble. You know, you're kind of depicting something that's very either completely from your imagination or something that's right in front of you. But it's very kind of, you go into your own world, I think. Yeah.
And were your friends at the time mainly from art, or like how did you bond with, what kind of stuff did you bond with people on?
Yeah, I think sense. Well at the quite a young age, I think, well, it's kind of tricky. When I first arrived back and I was kind of very into very into my art, I think I was quite quiet as like quite a young child, I think, as well, with my parents having divorced and kind of everything that happened out in Dubai was kind of hard for me to, I think, integrate. I think it took some time for me to kind of adjust to the English way of life, which is different to the way everything was in Dubai. And yeah, especially when you kind of experience, I would say, quite big family trauma. It just takes time to heal and to kind of grow into yourself, I think, a bit more.
So I think, truthfully, I need a bit of your help here, where obviously the context of this is I'm trying to give you a legacy-worthy interview that captures what's important to you. And on the form that you filled in, you said that there isn't really any sensitive topics or topics that you don't want to go to. And I noticed that you've mentioned the divorce and the trauma a few times. I obviously don't know the extent that I should go, but I might just give you an opportunity now of whatever you're comfortable or want to keep within a recording to reflect on your character growth. And I think I feel heartwarmed that right now you seem to really have that peace and the faith. But is there anything else about that period that you're comfortable and you think is particularly meaningful to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I mentioned as well that I was advocating for parent-child abduction. That was actually something that I personally experienced myself through my parents' divorce. So my mum, she abducted me in the Middle East, and I was not allowed to go to school. And I was I had about a period of about a year and a half where my dad had to kind of try and find me and bring me back to the UK. So yeah, that kind of element of it, I think, was extremely traumatizing and very disruptive to kind of my education and my life as well at the time.
How old were you, sorry?
I was about 8 years old when that happened.
So did you kind of comprehend or not?
I actually did. I think I was a very smart. I was a fairly smart child. I did apprehend, and actually, so it was a very complicated story. But when my dad had to leave for a period of time to go back to London, and that was when my mom abducted me, and he left me actually a secret phone. And I knew what the secret phone was for because he suspected that my mom might do something. And yeah, I remember getting the secret phone and being okay, something might happen, and it did. And when she was kind of taking me around these different places in Dubai and kind of keeping me from my dad, I would sometimes message him my location so that he would then potentially be able to come, but this kind of happened several times. And my phone ran out of battery, and
that's what I thought.
And there was just a whole dragged out process, and it ended up being a year. Then I ended up going to Turkey for 6 months, and then from there their kind of court system is much more kind of European, I would say. So my dad was able to get me back and get custody. But yeah, it was it's been very much a story, I would say, that has, I think, defined and shaped me. But I've always looked at it as something that's has inspirational power in that if I can go through that and be bottom of my class and can still get into Cambridge, then anyone else that has experienced trauma can do the same as well.
So at 8, did you already feel a closer connection to dad then?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah, we had a very special relationship, and actually even before 8, I think I was definitely always yeah.
So yeah, because obviously you've done so much work for kind of raising awareness for the parent-child abduction, which is I wouldn't say niche, that's not the right word, but I don't think many people would have had that experience. And so you got back to the UK, so I guess at that point your dad had got full custody and all that kind of stuff. Did you talk about this? Because were you open to talking about it? Because it must be quite...
Yeah, absolutely. I think, definitely in the first, maybe 8 years, maybe until my early 20s to kind of very late teens. I think I didn't really talk about it to anyone, and obviously I grew up just with a father, and kind of people were what's happened to your mom? I would kind of just brush it under the carpet and not really kind of touch on it. And I think it was actually when I went to Bath that my friend told me to go to this church, and it was the first time I shared it was with my church group, and I think everyone was just amazed. They were like, wait, what? Like, you seem so normal now. Like, how has this happened? They were just like totally shocked. And at that point I was like, oh, like, this is just happened. Like, I didn't view it as anything big, you know. I was like, oh, you know, just happened, it's fine. But I think from that point I realized, actually, you know, this story has such power. And actually that then inspired me to kind of start my initial business, looking at kind of the stories of the people and really kind of, exploring that. So it's I would say it's been the driver for all my steps forward, which is amazing.
So church communities are lovely, absolutely lovely. And were you religious until then, or were you exploring faith, or is your family religious?
So my grandmother works in a church, but growing up I didn't grow up in a necessarily quote unquote religious family. We would kind of do the typical thing of kind of maybe going at Christmas and Easter, but also we lived in Dubai, so it wasn't a particularly Christian place. It was a Muslim country. So I would say that I knew of God, but I didn't kind of know the person of Jesus. And I remember during the time that the whole abduction happened and everything, I remember my dad left me kind of the slip. It was in one of our bags of the Lord's Prayer. And that was like something that I prayed. And in general, I just prayed, I was like, God, if you're real, like, please just like save me from this situation. And when I was saved, I was like, oh, okay. But it wasn't really until until I got to kind of undergrad that then I actively, I would say, became a Christian. Wow.
Well, I mean, the gospel saves, and that's really heartwarming to hear that that the Lord's Prayer and other prayers had helped you. So any other prayers answered? I mean, I'm sure lots of prayers have been answered, but
so many prayers.
Any like significant prayers answered during that period of that difficulty that have helped you through?
Gosh, I think so do you mean during the abduction or so there was several there were several things. I think one which is extremely deep and personal to me was I actually almost tried to commit suicide during that time, and I remember almost like having this I wanted to basically jump from this building and just having this sense of like, just stop, like, don't do that. And I really honestly feel that was kind of like a miracle from God, like just saying like, don't do this way, because I have something so much better for you. And I think there was so many like crazy things that happened during that time. Also my phone that had my teddy bear that had my phone in it was also almost like taken away from me, and like it was almost found out by my mom. It was like so much stuff. I honestly think the whole thing I think was just I think God answering prayer, which is just insane.
I was writing a card for a Christian friend a few days ago, and I thought it really touched me in James 1:17. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above. I think it's just such a powerful kind of reminder, and how it helps with that gratitude as well. Have you read much of scripture in the Bible, and do you go back to it? Like, because I'm just thinking Book of Job, for example, where do you maybe see some kind of connection in that God has a master plan that we don't perhaps understand ourselves, but
absolutely,
it is still good.
It reminds me of, so I had a friend who was Christian as well, a little while back that I worked with, and he described this to me. He described kind of the way God sees things in like 4 dimensions. He was like, there's, you know, obviously 3 dimensions of the world, but there's a 4th dimension that is like the heavens, you know, and when things happen in life, we can see the 3 dimensions and we're questioning why that's happening, but there's always the 4th dimension and we might not understand that. So I've always like kept that in my mind, which is kind of interesting. Like,
Absolutely. And I think that's why I think the Book of Job is so interesting, because that's often people who don't have that faith would reference that as, how could that be a all-loving, perfect God if God is doing this to Job? But then people who have faith, and I guess in your words have that 4th dimension, they can see, well, if you take that into account, God's plan is still perfect and good.
Yeah, I mean, well, you could argue, why did Jesus have to suffer on a cross? You know, like, why did he have to go through all of that? But again, it's that fourth dimension of that God sees all, and God is superior to us. We're not superior to him, so we can't see everything. Yeah.
Which other parts of scripture have you found particularly comforting or inspirational?
I think the Psalms is very, very comforting. Obviously, there's like Psalm 23, there's Psalm 91, which, the Psalms I think are a great, I think, inspiration for me particularly. Yeah.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're like lost sheeps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a routine with Bible studies?
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a very good question. I would have to say my shortcomings are that I should be better at knowing my Bible, and that's something actually with my boyfriend that we've been trying to do more, as we've been like doing like Bible studies together and reading kind of like a verse. We've been going through Matthew, and reading it in kind of a historic context, as just to fully understand exactly what is in the scripture, because there's a lot of hidden meanings as well, like numbers can mean certain things, or there's especially when you as well reading the parables, there's always hidden meanings to those, so we're trying to read it from kind of more of an academic point of view as well, and
a critical lens.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a church group of friends who meet and talk about this as well, so yeah, I do try, but I should try harder.
So do you think those a lot of the miracles that Jesus performed, do you take them as literally that's exactly what happened, or is it a metaphor for kind of the powers of God and the love of God?
It's definitely a tricky one. Obviously, when you read it in the Bible, like when Jesus heals people from leprosy, or kind of raises people from the dead, I think it does feel very like literal. Whether that is the case, or that can be applied now, I'm not too sure, but I do believe that yes, God can heal, and that can happen today, but in the kind of narrative way that happens in the Bible, I'm not too sure.
Because obviously, fundamentalists would, for example, say that like the earth is 6,000 years old and God literally created the world in 7 days, and I guess it's hard to know for sure. That's so interesting. Any other things about faith that you want to share that is particularly important to you?
I think in terms of, I think you were asking about habits and things like that we were talking about earlier. I really do make an effort of my morning time is like my precious time. It's like sacred to me, and I'm definitely, anyone that knows me knows I'm a morning person, and I love to kind of just wake up early and like read a bit of scripture and just like kind of either journal on it or pray on it, and I feel like that sets me up for the day, and that's a practice that I've been doing for years, and just I do it every day. So I think that's, and like not having your phone on or like social media, just having literally just one-to-one, no distractions, time with like God.
So what's the biggest learning about God that you've had in the past few years?
Oh gosh, that is a very good question. I think that one would be probably around suffering, that even through suffering there is still good that I think God can do. I mean, like, take for example my situation. Obviously I went through suffering, but God can turn that suffering into something really perfect and beautiful. I would say I think that's probably been my biggest lesson.
And leading on from that, what do you wish friends who have yet to see God or experience God or know God or feel like they've got that personal relationship through the person of Jesus, what do you wish them to know?
I think that God loves you unconditionally, and I think that is such a beautiful thing that is such at the heart of the Christian faith, and that why kind of Jesus died on the cross was to demonstrate that love. And I don't think people experience and know that love enough, and that this is, I think, why we experience a lot of the problems in our society, say with like drugs and alcohol, because I think people turn to these other things for validation and self-worthiness, whereas when you have God, like to
made
some
in
degree,
the image of God,
you don't need to look to those worldly things, which I think is so powerful.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing about that faith element. You're very entrepreneurial.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
What was
Whenever people say that, I'm like, is this a compliment? Should I say thank you? I don't know. I feel like it's like it's a thank you. It's very nice for you to.
What was your first business and how did that come about?
Yeah, so yeah, my first business I initially had was called Majestical. It started off actually like very as these things do, very like backstreet kind of, just started off as like a passion project when I was doing my undergrad in Bath. And I had a real kind of passion for fashion. Oh my god, so bad. I had a
was
real,
that the slogan?
yeah. That was not the slogan, I promise you. But yeah, I just started like blogging with a friend of mine, so we kind of did it together, and she was like, no, I want to focus on my studies. I was like, no, I don't want to focus on my studies, so I'm going to continue to like work on this, and it grew to actually becoming like an editorial and print magazine where we kind of would interview women, people that we thought were really interesting, and yeah, put together a very curated kind of magazine. It started off initially online, and then went into print, and I worked with kind of editors, I worked with photographers, stylists. It was a lot of work, and I think it was very, very distracting from my studies, but
was that when you were in Bath?
Yes, it was when I was in Bath, so I was about 19, 20 at the time. And I really loved it. I was very motivated, I was very passionate. It was hard in that, you're having to email people, you have to collaborate with people, and I ran it all myself. Yeah. And yeah, it was exhausting. I don't know how I did it. I'm looking back now. But yeah, it became great. I got, many invites to like London Fashion Week and parties, and that's how I was featured in this Vogue. It was like the London's 10 best street style outfits of like that season, and I was in one of them. I was like, yes, that was like a great feeling to
New York Times as well. What
it was New York Times again. It was the same. Yeah. It was the same kind of photographer, and they used the same image and included me in the best street style.
That's
kind
pretty
of,
cool.
yeah, and Elle as well. It was literally like all the like fashion magazine. It was insane.
So you said, did that make a profit?
It did not, unfortunately, make a profit. No, so I did, that was a learning curve. Print magazines are not profitable. I think the online platform in itself, I think that was fairly profitable on the Instagram, but yeah, the print magazine was just too difficult to maintain. And I kind of reached a point where I was so burnt out, and having to then go into final years of architect school, I just couldn't kind of, maintain it, to be honest with you. So yeah, I kind of ended up stopping doing it, and was like, I'll just focus on, still having a love of clothes and everything, but just focusing on Instagram and like just doing blogging and stuff like that. Yeah.
For someone like me who's not very knowledgeable in fashion, what would you recommend me? Like, not to wear, as in like, how do I learn more about...
Oh, what, to like get a better fashion sense?
Actually, well, you can start with what I should wear.
What I should wear. I don't know. I think it's such an individual thing, though. I think, in general, I think there's not one size fits all. I think I found my own personal fashion taste has changed, as I go on, and it still continues to change. But I think once you know what you like, I think if you know you like kind of certain colours, stick to those. If you know you like certain brands, stick to those. I think in general, find things that fit you. I think the one thing I see with guys is that the fit is like not always the best. It's like either too baggy or like too like either too like skinny. I've seen it all. So just like try and find brands that align with your kind of your aesthetic, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess back to my original question, what could I, as someone who don't know much, do to learn more about the fashion industry and to improve my taste?
I think first is just read. I think there's so much literature out there. There's obviously Vogue, Elle. I'm not an expert in men's fashion, but I'm sure there's many men's magazines. In general, though, I think London has some really great shops. You can always go to the shops and like ask there. They often have people that work there that can kind of advise you. I think that's it.
And you mentioned how your fashion tastes have changed. Is it more of a gradual thing, or does it happen like, or you see something, it's like, oh, like this is really cool?
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe a mixture of both. I think in general,
any major like 180 shifts?
No, I think I don't think I ever had kind of horrendous changes. I think in general I always liked very little like colours, not too much like, although I'm wearing red today, but in general I had definitely a very distinct sense of taste in what I liked. And I think you do tend to find this as well with architecture school. Everyone is quite like stylish, or they have a specific niche, or they're very minimalist. There's like that creative kind of environment breeds the kind of induces that in you, I'd say. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I guess you studying architecture, obviously you're very hands-on and, you know, creating, and then you've also had experience in kind of the fashion industry and starting your own business. So you almost had multi-dimensional of both like the academic, you know, the hands-on, and also the business managerial side of things. Do you feel like you're, like, compared to a lot of other people who perhaps don't have those different dimensions, like what's your kind of advantage in this field, or what's kind of your edge as you go into the workforce?
Yeah, I think one thing that I realize is being like multifaceted per se. I think it's so important in kind of the business or work environment. And I think when you're kind of running your own business, you have to be very good with people. And I think that is something that I don't think people learn enough when going into like business, because you really need to know how to like negotiate, how to read people, how to like make them feel comfortable and be able to trust you. I think it's great to have multi levels of experience and do many different things. I was listening to a podcast, actually it was by my old pastor in my church. It's called the Pilgrimage Podcast, and there was the first episode in that series, actually. I highly recommend it. And he describes where he's in a coffee shop, just goes up and has this conversation with this really interesting guy that's wearing these really interesting clothes. And he asked the guy, he's like, so what have you done? What are you doing? He's like, I've done many things. And that podcast like really impacted me, because when I grow old, I want to like say to my like children or whatever, it's like, I want to be that like mom or grandmother that like says I've done like many things in my life and tried different things. Yeah.
So the other interest you have is real estate, which I guess is quite closely tied with architecture. But...
So I had so obviously I've been studying architecture, but in the past kind of year and a half I was very much questioning, do I really want to like go down the typical route of just becoming an architect? There were a lot of problems I saw in the industry that I didn't really like. It was like pretty badly paid and long hours. And I was like, is that the narrative I want for the rest of my life? And I still loved buildings. And I obviously growing up with a dad that did finance, I'm still very interested in finance. And we regularly debate about the financial industry and the stock market. And I thought real estate would be quite an interesting field, and that it kind of combines those two things of like buildings and that side, but also the financial side as well.
So I guess financial services, like when it comes to like banking in particular, doesn't always have the best reputation, and almost some people would argue that it's like polar opposite to what people or faith is meant to do. So how have you had any contemplations about how your faith fits in the financial services industry, or have you had chats with like your pastor or other people about how to glorify God in that environment, which is quite at times money driven?
That's a really good question, and I think in that sense, so I go to a church in London called HTB, and it's very like the demographic is very young professionals, and I do have a lot of friends that work in finance, and this topic does come up. I think the financial services industry, depending on what you do, can be quite Christian-led. But I think it does mean that you do need to stand up for your moral rights, and you do need to say no if something I think doesn't align with your values. And I think as well, it depends on the manner in which you view it. If you view it as you're serving, if you're, say, in a client-facing position, or I'm a real estate investor, I'm serving these people to develop better cities, and what initiatives and what things I invest in do matter. And it's from what place it's done. So, but I do agree that things definitely do need to change, and it's definitely, I think a lot of things are very, very profit driven, and not out of a good moral place. But there are also some great places that do a lot of kind of sustainable investing, or more kind of social impact driven investing as well. Yeah.
I guess like the Bible, again, I'm not a theologian, but I guess like the purpose of like human works is revealed in the Bible, kind of have three parts where like you reveal God's glory, engage in stewardship, and provide kind of a justice and love and all the good things that God stands for. And I guess finance, would you say, is also God's creation, right? So it has to serve a purpose, and it has a place in this world.
Absolutely.
So do you see yourself as someone who wants to tell their grandkids that you've done many things? Is finance therefore like a platform to be able to do more things, or do you think that you would be more finding that diversity within finance?
I think, real estate in particular, I think it's more of a platform, I think, to other things. And I think looking to the future, I'd really love to have my own business in kind of renovating, like restoring like more kind of like used either historic buildings. So that's kind of more what I would like to go into, and create a kind of niche like designer apartments in kind of London and Paris. So that's what I would love all this experience to lead me to. But of course, my mindset has been, wherever I'm working, to try and have a good, righteous attitude. And I mean, I had examples in my previous workplace where, they would lie about certain things, or things, were not morally right, but I still tried to, defend that situation and say, maybe that's not right, and maybe we should not do that. Which is hard because it makes you very counterculture, and it can make you not liked. But yeah.
Okay. You're also involved in the TEDx Society. Have you given a TED Talk? Do you want to? And if so,
I would love to give a TED Talk.
What would you talk on?
I think, like I mentioned, I think I would talk about how you could turn pain for good, and how, more of kind of, talk about my childhood, but how people can, utilize the pain that they've experienced, but to do great things.
So as you talk to other victims of parent-child abduction through your fundraising, through your volunteering, are there common threads that show up in people's stories, or is it really just quite individual and unique? And
I think I would say in general they are quite individual and unique, but so you Reunite, on their website, they do have kind of like testimonials from people that have experienced these things, and I would say mostly it devastates people, and I think for me to have kind of got my life together well in the way that, or things to have shaped the way they did, it was very lucky. I was extremely fortunate. I think in general, A, people lose a lot of money, B, they are extremely traumatized, so it's very hard to kind of get your life back on track. But what's so great about working with Reunite is that they are a charity that really help and support you, and they provide great legal advice, great kind of mental health advice. So it's been really great working with them.
And in terms of raising awareness, what exactly are you hoping people would understand that they don't already, like the misconceptions about parent-child adoption?
I think the main misconception I think that I see is that I don't think people realize A, what it is exactly, and B, the impact that it can have on kind of families and children in particular. I would say that's kind of my main misconceptions.
And for the children who have had to go through this traumatic experience, are there like 2 or 3 things that we should be aware of as a society to best support them?
I think the first one is mental health, supporting the children in terms of mental health, and I think the second I think the second thing would be to give them still a loving family environment. I think in my case, I was very lucky in that when I came back to the UK, I came into a very, very loving and supportive family environment. Whereas if you kind of don't have that, or if one of your parents is not as supporting and you come back to that, it can still be, you need to be in an environment that's very nurturing and supporting and caring for you.
That's wonderful. So you graduate this year.
Yay!
What is next?
What is next? Well, oh gosh, that is a good question. I'm applying for jobs at the moment. I'm hoping to get a job. That is.
I'm sure you will.
Oh, that is the main.
I think
thing.
your problem might be too many options and that stress from. Can I only do one?
Would be to do that. I think. I would love to potentially look at starting a business again eventually. I don't know at what point that might be, but I would love to do that. I think I would love to, first of all, just get a lot of business experience, and from that grow and then start.
Business is a very broad term. Like what?
Yeah.
Like in particular, do you want like sales or like manager or operational?
Yeah, I think manager, operational. I think also financial as well. Obviously, I studied architecture. I'm not an expert in that element. So I think more of a broader education in those other elements that my architecture education has given me. Yeah.
And does your dad still work in financial services?
He is kind of semi-retired, so yes and no.
And in terms of your relationship with him, obviously it's always been very special.
Yeah.
Do you call every day or like what?
Yeah, we call every day. Even like if I'm like busy, I'll still call him. No, we have a very special relationship, and I think that is, I would say he's my best friend as well as my dad, and my biggest like supporter. Like when I handed in my dissertation earlier this week, he was like, I'm just so proud of you. Like, and he actually even we had a guest night formal at Queen's a few months ago, and I was like, oh, Dad, why didn't you come up? And he came up and like met all my friends, and they were like, oh, your dad is so cool. I was like, yeah. No, we have a very special relationship, and I'm so thankful for that.
And in terms of like what he wants for you, like are there like things that he repeatedly mentions, like for example like happiness or resilience? Like what's his parenting style? He sounds really cool.
Parenting style, gosh. I think first and foremost is love. He always tries to demonstrate love, even if I've not been doing the right thing or been a bit naughty or like, especially when I was a teenager, like saying like teenager comments. No, he always showed me love, but he also, my dad was a real fighter, like he fought so hard to kind of get me back here, to get me on the right track, have the right education again. And I think he's instilled that like energy or like that mentality in me, and I think you can learn so many lessons from your parents, really fundamental building blocks to your life as well.
Is it easy for you to express your gratitude directly in front of him and to him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I do it all the time. Or loads of emojis on like text messages. Or yeah.
I've got a couple maybe final questions, but again, to give you a legacy-worthy interview, so hopefully a meaningful piece of recording that captures a snapshot of who you are, that you can listen back to in 10, 20 years' time, and not only tell your grandkids that you've done many things, but...
Actually, oh my gosh.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about before I conclude and wrap up?
I think you've touched on everything pretty much.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I guess second to last question, you're quite open on social media. And I think that takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, to put down some of your deeply held thoughts. And as we all know, as we continue to grow, our thoughts will change. But with social media and online presence and even the podcast, it's captured in here.
Yeah.
And I know that you like to quote other people, like, Malala, for example, about just the need for change and for women to speak up.
Yeah.
And I understand your journey has taught you about the need to share our struggles because it's all a part of that God's grand plan.
Yeah.
As you post these thoughts on social media, how much, what is the reaction that you get from others, both on the positive and negative side, and how do you handle both?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I've ever had a negative reaction.
Wow.
That's like to say something. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a negative reaction. Though I would say on my side, it does, whenever I'm like an overthinker, so I always think that people might read it and think like something about me, or they might read it and kind of, get a preconception of me. But I think when you do, just my view has been, if someone reads it and they choose not to like me or follow me, that's okay. But I do know that there will be people that are reading that will be really impacted by it. And I would say in general, I've had a very, very positive reaction. So and lots of really nice messages. So I think, it's very touching. Yeah.
Before I ask my final question, it's actually a typical final question, it suits you well because on your social media, you love making kind of reflections on lessons that you've learned and things that you want to work on. I'm just going to read out your full list of 2022 life lessons, and then I'll follow up with a final question.
I can't even remember what I wrote.
I think this would be great to capture in the recording for you. So you had 20. So 1, to fully trust God in all his plans for my life far exceeds mine. 2, to learn to make room for rest. 3, to learn to love people who are hard to love. 4, to enjoy and cherish every moment with your loved ones. 5, to invest in meaningful friendships and cultivate a community of people who will inspire you and help you become the best version of yourself. 3, to learn to say no. I'm grateful you said yes to the podcast. 7, to learn to be extravagantly generous with my time, resources, and money. 8, to learn to try to be on time, still a work in progress. Actually, you were early today.
I'm getting better. No.
9, to do every task and action with grace and love. 10, to relentlessly pursue God and my faith in everything I do. 11, patience is key. 12, learning to slow down and practice gratitude daily. This involves prayer and thanking God for all the miracles in my life. 13, blessings come unexpectedly. 14, your energy and time is precious. Spend it with people who appreciate it. 15, growth can be painful and you can outgrow your former blessings. 16, sometimes you have to push yourself and make sure to look after yourself in the process. 17, showing up as your best self is not easy and involves a conscious decision each day. 18, invest in memories and experiences. 19, cherish each moment with loved ones. 20, if someone lets you feel less than, they have no place in your life. So with that backdrop, the typical final question is, what's one, not 20, one message, quote, or saying you wish every educator, parent, community leader, teacher, coach would promote and every child would internalize?
Oh my gosh. Big question. Wow. Yeah, it's hard to pick one. But if I was to pick one, I think is to do and lead your life always in a place of love, loving yourself and loving other people and loving what you do. I think,
a lovely message to conclude. It's lovely to meet you. And I hope you've enjoyed the experience, and I'm sure you didn't know what to expect, and neither did I.
It's just me blabbing for an hour, but it's fine. No, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.